3:14 a.m. The bridge is quiet. Too quiet. Then, a sound no sailor ever wants to hear. A low groan. Metal tearing itself apart from the inside. The helmsman freezes. The hull is shuddering. Steel plates 40 feet below the waterline are peeling apart like wet paper. In the next 90 seconds, 200,000 barrels of crude oil will start leaking into open water. And the reef that caused it? It was on the chart the whole time. This wasn't a storm. This wasn't sabotage. This wasn't a freak accident of nature. This was a tanker built by expert engineers, captained by a licensed, experienced crew, sailing a route that had been mapped, charted, and sailed 1,000 times before. And still, it broke apart on a reef everyone already knew was there. Because behind every maritime disaster like this one, there's rarely a single catastrophic failure. There's one small human decision, one overlooked calculation, one shortcut that seemed harmless at the time. Today, we're pulling apart the anatomy of that decision, piece by piece, blueprint by blueprint, until you can see exactly how a $200 million vessel became a live oil bomb, floating dead in the water. This is the story of how simple math sinks giants. Every supertanker starts as a spreadsheet before it's ever a ship. Engineers calculate hull stress using something called load distribution, how the weight of oil, water ballast, and steel structure gets spread across the length of the vessel. Picture a tanker as a giant steel tube, floating between two forces: buoyancy pushing up, cargo weight pushing down. When those forces are balanced, the hull stays rigid. When they're not, the ship starts to flex, like a ruler bending in your hands. The original design accounted for this perfectly. Reinforced steel bulkheads were placed at precise intervals to absorb that flex. On paper, this ship could survive worse seas than the one it ultimately sank in. Then came the modification. To increase cargo capacity and profit per voyage, the operator approved a redesign. Extra tanks were added. More oil, more revenue, more weight. But here's the fatal shortcut. The reinforced bulkhead spacing was never recalculated for the new weight distribution. The people who changed the blueprint were not the same people who understood the original stress math. It's a classic communication gap. The commercial team wanted capacity. The structural team assumed nothing critical had shifted. Nobody reran the numbers. Nobody retested the model. A ship designed to flex safely under Load Plan A was now operating permanently under Load Plan B, a plan its own frame was never certified for. Now add years of wear. Salt water is relentless. It doesn't just rust steel, it attacks it at a molecular level, thinning the plates from the inside out. This is called corrosion fatigue. Routine inspections are supposed to catch this early. Ultrasonic thickness testing measures exactly how much steel remains before a plate becomes dangerously thin. But inspections cost money. Inspections cost time in port. And time in port is money lost. Maintenance logs show inspection intervals were quietly extended. Thickness readings that should have triggered replacement were logged as acceptable, just barely inside the safety margin. Each individual decision seemed minor. Together, they were a countdown clock.
The night of the disaster, the ship was fully loaded, heavier than its original design ever anticipated. As it moved through shallow coastal waters, the hull began to flex with every swell, exactly like the ruler in your hands. Except now, the reinforced points meant to absorb that flex were spaced too far apart and thinned by corrosion. Then the ship grazed the reef, a known, charted obstacle avoided by every other vessel on record. The impact itself was minor, a scrape, not a collision. But that small impact concentrated stress at exactly the weakest point in the hull, the exact spot where the outdated blueprint and the corroded steel intersected. The load transferred instantly, like cracking a windshield with a single pebble. What should have been a scratch became a structural collapse in under 3 minutes. By sunrise, the scale was undeniable. Crude oil spread across miles of coastline. Fishing communities lost their livelihoods overnight. Seabirds, shellfish beds, and coral systems absorbed damage that would take a decade to measure and longer to heal. Investigators arrived within days. They didn't just study the wreck. They pulled every blueprint revision, every maintenance log, every inspection report the company had filed for years. What they found became a textbook case. The original hull design was sound. The failure was procedural, a structural change without recalculation, a maintenance schedule quietly stretched thin, two separate teams who never fully understood each other's math. The investigation forced sweeping change. New maritime law required that any structural modification trigger a full independent, stress recertification. No exceptions, no shortcuts. Ultrasonic hull testing intervals became mandatory, not optional, enforced by international maritime authorities rather than left to individual operators. And double hull construction, a second layer of steel between cargo and open ocean, went from optional upgrade to global legal requirement. The lesson investigators kept repeating was simple. Safety rules don't get written in a boardroom. They get written after something breaks. Here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. Every safety rule protecting modern ships, bridges, and buildings exists because this exact pattern repeated itself again and again and again until regulators finally forced an industry to listen. Structural engineering isn't just steel and math. It's a discipline built entirely on the memory of disasters like this one. If this kind of deep, human-side engineering breakdown fascinates you as much as it fascinates us, subscribe now, because next week we're breaking down a different collapse, where the flaw wasn't in the steel at all. It was in a single line of paperwork nobody double-checked, because in this industry, every regulation has a name attached to it, and the only reason we're safer today is because somebody, somewhere, paid the price first.